Hello and welcome to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. On July 31st, 2019, I released the episode of And the Runner-Up Is on the 1961 Best Picture race, where we discussed Judgment at Nuremberg as the likely runner-up that lost Best Picture to West Side Story. But on second thought, what if the runner-up was really The Hustler? Hello, and welcome back to On Second Thought, where we discuss another Best Picture nominee that we did not cover as the runner-up on the main show, and discuss whether it may have actually been the runner-up. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, and we are revisiting 1961 today. And on the main show, I said Judgment at Nuremberg was the runner-up to West Side Story. But today we are discussing if it actually could have been a different film, and that film is The Hustler. And my guests today, you've heard quite a bit on a different bonus series, How Did They Win, with the great Tom O'Brien. But this is actually the first time she is appearing on an episode of On Second Thought, which is wild. But she's also been on the Best Picture main show. Very excited to be chatting with you one-on-one. Writer at In Session Film and so many other wonderful places. Please welcome back to the show, Amy Thomasson.
Hello, I am beyond excited to be here today.
I know you love this film, so I jumped at the chance to have you on for this.
I do. I leapt like a panther
You did.
at the chance.
You made it known that I need to be on this episode, and here you are.
I need to be it. Yes.
Yes. You
Such
hustled
a good
your
movie.
way onto the show, as it were.
I did. I do what I need to do.
Yes. Well, let's just jump right into this very fascinating film.
Yes.
The Hustler. It is a drama about a small-town pool shark named Eddie Felson, nicknamed Fast Eddie. And he decides to challenge this legend named Minnesota Fats to a game. And he does really well, but then he just becomes increasingly drunk and then ultimately loses the game and also most of his money. And then he meets this woman named Sarah, who is an alcoholic. And the two of them get into kind of a relationship. And eventually Eddie's partner, Charlie, comes back and sort of encourages him to get back into the game. And eventually he does so, but he gets involved with a rather notorious gambler, Bert Gordon, which ultimately proves to be like making a deal with the devil. So, I mean, that's essentially what the film is without getting into too much of the rest of it, which we will be talking about. The film was directed by Robert Rossen, who co-wrote the screenplay with Sidney Carroll. It stars Paul Newman as Eddie, Piper Laurie as Sarah, George C. Scott as Bert Gordon, Mirren McCormick as Charlie, and Jackie Gleason as Minnesota Fats. So The Hustler made about $8 million at the box office, and it was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, winning 2, but not Best Picture. So, Amy, let's talk about it. I mean, we've been mentioning how you really do love this film. So what is it about it that sort of resonates with you?
Well, first of all, circa 1961 Paul Newman.
I mean,
Let's begin there.
Yeah.
I have already promised Mr. Jacobson that I would not spend the entire length of this podcast talking about how good looking circa 1961 Paul Newman is. But
Right.
That's the initial draw of the movie.
Fair. That's fair.
It's a good way to get people who have never heard of this movie to watch this movie.
Yeah.
Especially the women, because this is not a very female-oriented movie.
Perhaps not.
But the performances are electrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just Newman being good looking. He's such a phenomenal talent. But the supporting actors, especially George C. Scott and Jackie Gleason, you can't take your eyes off them when they're in a scene. And there are certain shots in the movie, especially the first time he plays Minnesota Fats and we're introduced to him and we're introduced to George C. Scott. And Scott and Gleason are sitting next to each other, and they're just sort of, it's like a mise-en-scène. And it's just electrifying. They just fill the screen with this quiet intensity, especially Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And it just pulls you right in. And then at the end of the movie, you almost feel like you need to take a shower because you feel like you're in that smoky, sweaty, cigarette-filled pool hall the whole movie. And it is a very, very gritty film, and that it came so early in the 60s is kind of surprising, especially the year that it came out, which had a lot more noble and capital I important films that came out.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, I've only actually seen this myself once before this. So this was my second time watching the film. So there were definitely parts I'd forgotten about, which kind of made this like a fun watch. Maybe not entirely fun, because there's definitely some seedy moments that happened, as you mentioned, but an engrossing watch, I would say. I love a character study, and that's exactly what this movie is, you know, more than like a sports drama or what, you know, any kind of genre you want to attach to it. It's like, this is like character first, you know.
It is, and of more than one character.
Oh yeah.
And that's why it's so great. And I've seen this movie 100 times because I got into classic movies in 8th grade. And again, Paul Newman.
Yeah.
What a hottie. I know that's like the understatement of the
not a
millennium.
Hot take. Right. Yeah. But
in other news.
I love it's relatively small scale, but I feel like it's able to really explore actually a lot of different themes about like being a person and just having the deck stacked against you, and like what do you do in that situation? What choices do you make to sort of get ahead? Do you choose the easy way out? Do you sort of play it conservatively, or do you like really take the big risks, even if it means like losing, you know?
Exactly. And also what defines success and what defines a loser. And the George C. Scott, what he can do with a line is unbelievable. And one of my favorite moments in the film is when little cocky Eddie Felson is, I'm the best, and I'm the best you're ever going to see. And even if you beat me, I'm still going to be the best. And he's all Paul Newman in all his Paul Newman glory.
Oh, yeah.
And then the screen shifts to Gleason and Scott doesn't even move. He just sort of leans forward a little bit and says, stick with this kid. He's a loser. And then it cuts to Paul Newman, and Paul Newman turns around like, wait, what? Like, and he's totally full of swagger. And you know, you're like, dude, you are about to get the biggest takedown of your life. And then even at the end, when he's like, you're a loser, Bert. Oh, and then the you owe me money line. Again, you owe me money. Throwaway line. But the way that Scott says it is like a punch in the face.
Yeah, he is terrifying in this film. Even like at his most still moments, I feel like he's the most terrifying.
Especially with those glasses that he has.
Yes.
It's like, don't look at me, because I think I might like burst into flames.
Yeah, or tears.
Or tears, or both.
Right. But yeah, it's just it's very like meta-textual, I think, this film, where it is sort of about like risk and reward, and then that's part of the game of pool, but then there's also like the personal element for Eddie and this relationship he has with Sarah, and just sort of what happens there as he makes certain choices that lead you down a very dark path. And then by the time we get to the end, it's like, when you look at what the ending is, not to jump too much ahead already, but when you look at what that ending is on paper, it's like, he's accomplished his goal professionally from what we think it is from the start, and yet it feels like he sort of lost everything in the process, which is like this really fascinating sort of contradictory thing that we wouldn't really see all that much in 1961. I mean, it's so ahead of its time.
And especially that these characters, there's not a noble character among them. And nope. I love small movies about, like, the word they would use in the movie, losers, these outcasts, these dirty, flawed people who sort of find each other.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite types of movies.
Absolutely. Yeah. No heroes here.
Yeah, and even Sarah, you know, she's with her poor twisted leg, and, you know, she's an alcoholic hanging out at the bus station. Like, that's not, she's not this noble, she's not Jane Wyman in The Lost Weekend. Like, you're a down and out man, and I've got my fur coats, and I'm going to pray for you and make you, you know, and save you. That's not who she is.
Yeah. She's not like the classic wife, girlfriend, supportive on the side sort of thing, which is another thing I love. Before we get too much ahead, I do want to add in some of the background with this movie, which is that Robert Rossen had been involved with the Communist Party in the 30s, and he was in the HUAC hearings in the 40s, and at first he refused to name names, but then he ultimately did. And then just sort of in his own reflecting on that decision, he sort of realized the cost of what he had done, and sort of like making this Faustian bargain sort of thing to protect himself. But then it just ruined a lot of the friendships that he had. And that apparently really found its way into writing this film, which is like all about, you know, morality and ethics and making those kinds of choices. And then, like, only after the fact do you realize maybe what you've done. And I think that's sort of just what makes Eddie such an interesting character. And that, you know, again, not to get too far ahead, but the fact that he does accomplish that goal, but his personal life is like ruined. I feel like there's just
especially
a nuance
the end
there.
Yeah,
totally.
I'm gonna rewatch that monologue as soon as we're done. That final monologue that adds a whole other level of depth to it.
Yeah, so it's really just exploring these really fascinating themes that do feel like they come from a personal place for Robert Rossen, and I think that's what makes it feel truthful. So obviously I agree on Paul Newman. I think he's just perfectly cast here. He has so much swagger, so much charisma, and I feel like he's able to sort of channel all of that into making this game of pool really cool and sort of appealing. And
totally, right? He's so cool in this movie.
I read about how the game of pool became very popular after the release of this film. Not a surprise, because he could make anything cool. But yeah, I mean, you even see, like, at the beginning, he's like walking into that pool hall and it's like really quiet, and he says it's like a church, you know, and he kind of has like this romantic view of the whole thing. And, you know, we also, like, we see him talking in the game, like talking to Charlie about Fats, and how like commenting on how graceful he is and like a dancer, and sort of like comparing it to like playing a violin, like, again, very romanticizing it, you know,
and how he's like leaning forward like, yes, this man is just awesome, but I'm gonna take him down. The only other actor that really could have even come close to this is like Steve McQueen.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I'm not, with no due respect to Newman, who's perfect in this role, but that's the only other person with that level of cool and swagger that would even remotely come close.
Yeah, I would have been interested to see his take on this material, but
it would have been, right?
But yeah, I feel like there's just something about the game that is very like romantic to him, and he sort of envisions this sort of like David versus Goliath situation of him versus Fats, and like taking down the big imposing kind of opponent, and like getting the girl, and like that's what it's all about. But we see how it's a lot more complicated than that.
And also how Gleason, just how they present Gleason is just amazing. He comes in and he's got
Yeah.
that cheap shirt kind of buttoned up in that jacket, no tie. Gleason comes in, he's got the rings on his finger, he's got the suit, he's got the vest, he's got the pocket square. And he's Jackie Gleason, who also has just as much swagger as Paul Newman. And God bless him. He is so good in this movie.
He is. And
Effortless.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like in my memory of the film, somehow I associated that with like a bigger performance than what it actually is. But he's very like lived in and very in control of that character.
Oh yeah, he just like waltzes in. You also, if you, especially, I'm assuming if you haven't seen it in a long time, you think he has more screen time than he actually has.
That too, absolutely. Yeah, I was very surprised looking back. Not in it very much.
Because when you look back,
makes
you're like,
a big impression.
He's only in 2 scenes.
Yeah. In the beginning and the
But
end.
again,
He's gone for like 2 hours almost. But yeah, enough of an impression to get a nomination here. So kudos to the Academy for singling him out there.
I can't wait till we get to that portion.
Yes.
Oh my, boy, do I have opinions.
Yes. Well, oh, yes. Related to that, absolutely. So do I. But I feel like that first game between the two of them kind of goes on like at least maybe 15 minutes. And the way it plays out, it kind of feels like maybe like a subversion of how you might expect a game like that to be sort of edited with like quick cuts and like fast-paced music. Like we get a little bit of that, like there's one smaller montage, but I feel like it flows very naturally.
It does.
Not that pool is like some fast sport necessarily, but I feel like
it's not this riveting thing. It's sitting and watching two guys hit a ball with a stick. But to make it pull you in, and then to also feel like it doesn't feel overly long,
right?
But you still feel exhausted by the time they're done.
Yeah, which is what it should feel like, because they're going for like a full day,
25 hours.
Yeah,
and you feel it, man. You feel it.
Also, for what it's worth, I do remember seeing a number of shots where like it's not like they were broken up shots of like, you know, one guy hitting the ball and then another shot of the ball going in the pocket. Like they're actually playing pool and they're like pretty good at it.
They are. And, you know, it's noted that Gleason, of course, is this amazing pool player,
right?
Which does not surprise me at all.
No.
Like Jackie Gleason just seems like he was the coolest freaking guy ever. He was also apparently a great dancer. Like, go you, Jackie Gleason, breaking stereotypes of what we think you're capable of.
Yeah,
I love that.
Definitely. So the game goes on. He loses basically all his money. All he's left with is like, he's got like $200 down and out. And it's like he's essentially the hero of the story on paper that we're following, and maybe we expect maybe in like a more generic film that he'll struggle to get to that level again, but then in the end he'll beat Fats and he'll have this triumphant moment. Again, we'll revisit that later.
The music will swell.
Right. Yes. But then, of course, he meets this woman, Sarah, who I really want to talk about, Piper Laurie here, at this cafe at this bus station. And I think she's another one who's perfectly cast, like so great for this role as just a woman who has gone through some shit. You know, she has gone through it.
Totally. Like, she's at a bus station, dude. Yeah. This isn't like some cute little coffee shop, and she's not this like cute little
right.
No, it's like, hey, I'm a total loser and failure at life. How are you doing? Hey, I'm a big failure too. Yeah. I'll sit with you and we can be losers together. Yes.
Exactly. Like commiserate, basically. Yeah. But she has this way about her that's very guarded, and I feel like, you know, especially with that slightly like deeper voice that she has, it's so
that husky voice.
Yes, it's very evocative. And she's really so much better than I even remembered her being. Honestly, it was like one of those cases in my mind where I was like, is she lead? Is she supporting? Like, probably supporting. But then watching it again, I was like, I guess I forgot how much she really does factor into the plot. But I do think that she's a co-lead. What do you think?
I wouldn't have put her in as lead.
Okay.
Just because of the year that it was.
Well, yeah.
That was a
It
stacked
is.
year for Best Actress, and
I get that. Yeah.
compared to the other women that were nominated that year, her part seems much more supporting, but
Yeah.
you're not entirely wrong. It's not super
I think
clear
it's a
cut.
borderline. I think it's a borderline
Yeah.
case, and it could go
I'm
either
not
way, and you wouldn't be
offended.
surprised.
I'm not offended
Right.
by
No.
it.
Yeah.
It's not Patricia Neal winning for HUD, which that's a whole separate podcast.
Yes, exactly. Just a few years after this, actually. Yeah.
Yes, two years later.
Yeah.
But her character definitely has a depth and an arc all on its own. So she's much more than just the chick in the movie.
Right. That's part of why I felt like the film gives her, even if it's not as much, like she's not the lead of the film, clearly, but I feel like she gives her enough, and she's quite integral to the plot by the end. Not at the end, but as the film is driving towards its end, that I feel like it's somewhat justified. But we will get more into that when I actually cover that on the main Best Actor series for me, but you can talk about it later as well. I don't want to spoil my thoughts for that, but
no.
But I mean, I feel like my first introduction to Piper Laurie was like a lot of people of a certain generation, which is Carrie. But yeah, this is quite a bit different from her. And I think the way that relationship unfolds is actually very realistic. You know, it's not romanticized at all.
No, not at all. And when they meet and she's like, what, you just want to go out into the back alley?
Right.
That's not cute. And that she's not this hot little ingenue type.
Model type, right. Yeah.
Yeah, she's very plain looking. She's not a great beauty.
She's worldly, I would say.
Exactly. But speaking of Carrie, Piper Laurie plays characters that are a little unhinged very, very well. I think that's
true.
her strength.
Yeah.
Whether it's under the surface, unhinged, or
like
on
coming at you with a knife. Right.
Exactly.
Yes. But yeah, it's like they talk very briefly in that first meeting, and then he falls asleep and she pays for his coffee and leaves. But then, of course, they do meet again and they get to know each other. I love the little exchange where he tells her his name and she says that it should be Eddie. And she asks, like, what her name should be. And he's like, whatever you want it to be, basically. And she's like, it's Sarah, because that's what it is. Because I feel like you're really seeing, like, an old soul there. Like, someone who's very observant and, again, been through some shit, you know, has a certain way of thinking.
This isn't her...
Right.
Yep.
This
isn't her first time meeting a guy at a bus station.
Right, exactly.
Although, I have to admit, when I was watching, I was like, you know, I've been to a lot of bus stations in my life. I've never gotten picked up by Paul Newman. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, maybe that aspect of it is not realistic. Fair enough. You got a point
when
there.
she's like, so what? You think I'm just going to go out back with you?
Mm-hmm.
Because you know that this woman has not been treated well by life.
Exactly.
And why she hasn't been treated well by this perceived disability.
Right, exactly. And she rejects his advances at first, like when he's going in for a kiss, and she like turns away. And
you're too hungry.
You're too hungry. Yes. You feel like she's definitely been through this before with other men, and I feel like she just wants to control the narrative now, in a way. Like, she doesn't want to go through the same song and dance that she's been through so many times. And she feels like he could be someone different. Thank you for listening to this preview of On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup.is and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes, a Slack channel, and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.